I was a successful architect with a thriving career and what I thought was a perfect marriage. Nathan and I had been together for 6 years, living in a beautiful apartment downtown. We seemed to have it all: challenging jobs we loved, a wide circle of friends, and each other. I truly believed I was living a charmed life. Looking back now, I realize I was almost naive in my happiness. I threw myself completely into my work and my marriage, never questioning that Nathan might not be as committed as I was. Perhaps, if I'd been more observant, I would have noticed the small cracks forming in our relationship sooner. But I was blissfully unaware, focused on designing my latest project, a sustainable mixed-use development that I was certain would put my name on the map. I remember the exact moment I realized how lucky I was. It was a Tuesday evening, and I had just nailed my presentation to the city planning board. They had unanimously approved my design, praising its innovative approach to urban living. I practically floated home, eager to share the news with Nathan. When I walked through our front door, the apartment was filled with the aroma of my favorite meal, Nathan's homemade lasagna. He greeted me with a kiss and a glass of champagne. "To celebrate your big win," he said with a grin. I was shocked. I hadn't even told him about the presentation yet. "How did you know?" I asked. Taking a sip of the bubbly, Nathan's eyes twinkled. "I may have called your assistant to find out how it went. I knew how important this project was to you." I felt my heart swell with love and gratitude. This man, who worked long hours at his own demanding job, had taken the time to not only remember my big day, but to celebrate it in such a thoughtful way. We spent the evening laughing and talking, making plans for the future. Nathan listened intently as I excitedly described every detail of the presentation, offering genuine praise and insightful questions. As we cuddled on the couch later that night, Nathan wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, Olivia. You're going to change the world with your designs." In that moment, I felt like the luckiest woman alive. I had a fulfilling career, a beautiful home, and a husband who supported and celebrated my successes as if they were his own. I snuggled deeper into Nathan's embrace, savoring the warmth and security of our love. "I love you," I murmured, feeling truly content. "I love you too," Nathan replied, kissing the top of my head. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I remember thinking that life couldn't possibly get any better than this. I had everything I'd ever wanted and a partner to share it all with. Little did I know that the perfect life I thought I was living was about to come crashing down around me. But that night, in our cozy apartment with the man I loved by my side, I was simply happy, blissfully, naively happy. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when the first cracks in my perfect world began to appear. It was about a month after that blissful evening when Nathan had surprised me with dinner. I was working late at the office, putting the finishing touches on some blueprints, when my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I frowned at the message. It wasn't unusual for Nathan to work late. He was a dedicated lawyer, after all. But something about the terseness of the text nagged at me. I pushed the feeling aside, chalking it up to stress from his latest case. As the weeks went by, those late nights became more frequent. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were both ambitious, career-driven people. But then I started noticing other little things that seemed off. One evening, I was folding laundry when I caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume on one of Nathan's shirts. It was light, floral, nothing like the musky cologne I wore. I held the shirt to my nose, inhaling deeply. Maybe it was from a client, or perhaps he'd walked past someone wearing strong perfume. I tried to rationalize it, but a seed of doubt had been planted. Then there was the phone. Nathan, who had always been pretty casual about his cell phone, suddenly became very protective of it. He started taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. Once, when it buzzed while he was in the shower, I reached for it out of habit. Nathan burst out of the bathroom, a towel hastily wrapped around his waist. and snatched the phone before I could see who was calling. "Sorry," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "It's a sensitive case. Client confidentiality, you know?" I nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. It made sense, didn't it? Lawyers dealt with private information all the time, but the incidents kept piling up. Nathan started going to the gym more often, buying new clothes, paying more attention to his appearance. On the surface, these were all positive changes. But combined with his distant behavior and secretive phone habits, they made me uneasy. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I decided to broach the subject. "You've been working really late recently," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Is everything okay at the firm?" Nathan tensed almost imperceptibly before forcing a smile. "Yeah, just a big case. You know how it is." I did know how it was, but something about his response felt rehearsed. "Anything you can talk about?" I pressed gently. He shook his head. "Sorry, babe. Confidentiality agreement. You understand, right?" I nodded, even as doubts swirled in my mind. Of course I understood confidentiality, but Nathan had always been able to talk about his cases in general terms before. What made this one so different? As the days passed, I found myself watching Nathan more closely. I noticed how he would step out of the room to take phone calls, how he would angle his body away from me when texting. Each little action, innocuous on its own, added to the growing knot of anxiety in my chest. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. I padded into the kitchen, expecting to find him making coffee. Instead, I found a hastily scribbled note on the counter. "Emergency at work, had to go in, don't know when I'll be back." I stared at the note, my heart sinking. Emergency at work? On a Saturday? It wasn't impossible, but it was unusual. And why hadn't he woken me to tell me in person? I spent the day alternating between trying to distract myself with work and obsessively checking my phone for messages from Nathan. He didn't return until late that evening, looking tired and distracted. "How was the emergency?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Huh? Oh, yeah. It's handled now," he replied vaguely, heading straight for the shower. As I listened to the water running, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The Nathan I knew would have regaled me with stories about the crisis he'd averted. He would have been energized, not drained. That night, as Nathan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I wanted desperately to believe that everything was fine, that I was imagining things. But deep down, a voice was whispering that where there's smoke, there's fire. I rolled over, watching Nathan's peaceful face in the dim light. He looked the same as always, the man I'd fallen in love with, the man I'd built my life with. But for the first time since we'd been together, I found myself wondering if I really knew him at all. As the weeks went by, the little oddities in Nathan's behavior that I'd initially brushed off began to snowball into something I couldn't ignore. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I could see the disaster coming, but I felt powerless to stop it. One evening, I was waiting for Nathan to come home for our weekly date night. We'd made plans to try out a new restaurant downtown, and I'd even bought a new dress for the occasion. But as the clock ticked past our reservation time, Nathan was nowhere to be seen. I called his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep the worry and frustration out of my voice. "Hey, honey, just wondering where you are. Give me a call when you get this." 2 hours later, Nathan finally stumbled through the door. His tie was askew, and he smelled faintly of alcohol. "Oh, shit," he muttered when he saw me sitting on the couch, still in my new dress. Date night. I completely forgot. "Where were you?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "Got caught up with work. We closed a big case, and the team went out for drinks to celebrate." He wouldn't meet my eyes as he spoke. "You couldn't have called." "My phone died. I'm sorry." "Olivia, I'll make it up to you, I promise." I wanted to believe him. I wanted so badly for there to be a simple explanation for everything. But as I watched him stumble to the bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was lying to me. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to make us breakfast, a peace offering of sorts. As I was setting the table, Nathan's phone buzzed on the counter. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was a text from someone named Amanda. The preview just said, "Last night was..." My heart stopped. Who was Amanda, and what had happened last night? When Nathan shuffled into the kitchen, I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a mess of questions and suspicions. "Sleep well?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Like a log," he mumbled, reaching for the coffee. I watched him closely, looking for any sign of guilt or discomfort, but Nathan seemed oblivious to my scrutiny, scrolling through his phone as he sipped his coffee. "Any plans for today?" I asked, desperate to keep the conversation going. Oh, yeah, I've got to go into the office for a bit. This case is really heating up." My stomach clenched. "On a Sunday?" Nathan shrugged. "The law doesn't take weekends off, babe." As he got ready to leave, I found myself cataloging every detail. The crisp shirt he chose, the extra splash of cologne, the way he double-checked his appearance in the mirror. "Have a good day," I said as he headed for the door. He gave me a distracted peck on the cheek. "You too. Don't wait up for me." As soon as the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, alternating between convincing myself I was overreacting and imagining worst-case scenarios. By the time Nathan came home that evening, I was a ball of nerves. "How was work?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fine," he replied, heading straight for the shower. I listened to the water running, fighting the urge to go through his pockets, to check his phone. What had happened to me? I'd never been the jealous, suspicious type before, but then again, Nathan had never given me reason to be. When he came out of the bathroom, I decided to take a risk. "Nathan," I said, my heart pounding. "Is everything okay with us, I mean?" He looked startled. "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" "I don't know. You've just seemed distant lately." Nathan's face softened. He came over and pulled me into a hug. "I'm sorry, Olivia. I know I've been wrapped up in this case, but I promise, everything's fine." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to melt into his embrace and forget all my doubts. But as I breathed in his freshly showered scent, I couldn't help but wonder if everything was really fine. Why did it feel like he was slipping away from me? That night, as Nathan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The question swirled in my mind like a tornado. Who was Amanda? Why was Nathan really working so late? And most importantly, what was I going to do about it? I turned to look at Nathan's peaceful face, illuminated by the soft moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. He looked exactly the same as he always had, the same man I'd fallen in love with, the same man I'd built my life with. But for the first time in our relationship, I found myself wondering if I really knew him at all. As I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind. I needed answers, and I was going to get them, one way or another. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who snooped through her husband's things. But here I was, heart pounding, as I rifled through Nathan's desk drawer while he was at work. The guilt gnawed at me, but the need to know the truth was stronger. "This is ridiculous," I muttered to myself, closing the drawer with a sigh. I'd found nothing incriminating, just some old receipts and work documents. Part of me was relieved, but another part felt even more frustrated. If Nathan was hiding something, he was doing a damn good job of it. I decided to take a different approach. That evening, I casually mentioned to Nathan that I was thinking of surprising him at work for lunch someday. "Oh, that's not necessary," he said quickly, not meeting my eyes. "My schedule's so unpredictable these days. I wouldn't want you to come all that way for nothing." His response only fueled my suspicions. I nodded, pretending to accept his explanation. But my mind was already formulating a plan. The next day, I called in sick to work and staked out Nathan's office building. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad spy movie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was my only chance to get answers. Hours ticked by, and I was about to give up when I saw Nathan exit the building. My heart leapt into my throat as I watched him climb into a taxi. Without thinking, I flagged down another cab and told the driver to follow Nathan's. "Lady, I ain't no private eye," the cabbie grumbled, but he followed my instructions. We trailed Nathan's taxi across town, finally stopping outside a small, trendy cafe. I watched, my stomach in knots, as Nathan got out of his cab and entered the cafe. A few minutes later, a striking blonde woman joined him. "That'll be $45, the cabbie said, interrupting my thoughts. I paid him absently, my eyes glued to the cafe window. Nathan and the woman were sitting close, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. As I watched, Nathan reached across the table and took her hand. The sight hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled back to my cab, barely able to give the driver my address through the lump in my throat. Back at home, I paced our apartment, unsure what to do with this new information. Should I confront Nathan? Pretend I didn't know? My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. When Nathan came home that evening, I struggled to act normal. He kissed me on the cheek, the same lips that had probably kissed that woman just hours ago. "How was your day?" I asked, hating how my voice trembled. Same old," he replied, heading for the shower. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the water run, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. I needed more evidence, I decided. I couldn't confront Nathan with just my word against his. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. The PI, a no-nonsense woman named Jess, listened to my story without judgment. "I'll need access to his phone records and credit card statements," she said. "Can you get those?" I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and shame. This was really happening. I was really investigating my own husband. Over the next week, I became a master of deception. I intercepted bills before Nathan could see them, made copies of statements, and forwarded them to Jess. Each night, I lay next to Nathan in bed, feeling the gulf between us grow wider with each passing day. Jess called me a week later. "I've got some information," she said, her voice neutral. "Do you want to meet?" We met in a quiet coffee shop across town. Jess slid a folder across the table to me. "Are you sure you want to see this?" she asked. I nodded, my hands shaking as I opened the folder. Inside were photos of Nathan with the blonde woman I'd seen at the cafe. They were holding hands, laughing together, and in one gut-wrenching image, kissing passionately outside an unfamiliar apartment building. "Her name is Amanda," Jess said quietly. "She works at Nathan's firm. They've been meeting regularly for the past 3 months." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 3 months. While I'd been worrying about work and planning our future, Nathan had been building a life with someone else. "There's more," Jess continued. "Credit card statements show dinner reservations, hotel bookings, and the phone records. There are hundreds of texts and calls between them." I closed the folder, unable to look at the evidence of my shattered marriage any longer. "Thank you," I managed to say. Jess reached out and squeezed my hand. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said simply. I left the coffee shop in a daze, the folder clutched to my chest like a shield. Now I had my proof, but I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, aching sadness. As I walked home, I found myself wondering, what happens now? Do I confront Nathan? Do I leave? The future I'd so carefully planned now seemed like a distant dream, shattered by the harsh reality of Nathan's betrayal. One thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. And as I climbed the stairs to our apartment, I steeled myself for the confrontation that I knew was coming. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter how painful it might be. After my meeting with Jess, I felt like I was living in a fog. I had the evidence of Nathan's betrayal, but I found myself hesitating to confront him. Part of me still clung to the hope that there was a reasonable explanation for everything, that I was jumping to conclusions. One evening, as Nathan and I were having dinner, I decided to test the waters. "I ran into your colleague Tom today," I said casually, watching Nathan's reaction closely. "He mentioned you've been working closely with a new associate on that big case. Amanda, I think he said her name was." Nathan's fork clattered against his plate. For a split second, I saw panic flash in his eyes before he composed himself. "Oh, yeah," he said, his voice slightly strained. "Amanda's been a great help on the case. Sharp lawyer." I nodded, my heart sinking. Even now, given the perfect opportunity to come clean, Nathan was choosing to lie. "Maybe we should have her over for dinner sometime," I suggested, forcing a smile. "I'd love to meet her." Nathan paled visibly. Maybe. She's pretty busy these days. We'll see." The conversation moved on, but the tension lingered in the air. That night, as Nathan slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the folder of evidence burning a hole in my bedside drawer. The next day, I decided to dig a little deeper. While Nathan was in the shower, I quickly scrolled through his recent calls. Sure enough, there were multiple calls to and from Amanda every day. My finger hovered over her number. Should I call her, confront her? In the end, I chickened out, hearing Nathan turn off the shower. As the days passed, I found myself on an emotional roller coaster. One moment, I was filled with rage, ready to confront Nathan and throw him out. The next, I was consumed by doubt, convinced I was overreacting. What if Amanda really was just a colleague? What if I was destroying our marriage over nothing? I started noticing little things that I'd overlooked before. The way Nathan's phone would buzz late at night and he'd quickly silence it. How he'd step out to take calls, speaking in hushed tones. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his clothes. One afternoon, I was doing laundry when I found a small scrap of paper in Nathan's pocket. On it was scrawled a phone number and the name, Amanda, with a heart next to it. My hands shook as I held the paper. This was it, undeniable proof in Nathan's own handwriting. But even then, I hesitated. What if it wasn't what it looked like? What if I was seeing what I expected to see, rather than the truth? I decided to take one last risk. I called the number on the paper, my heart pounding. A woman's voice answered. "Hello?" I froze, unable to speak. "Hello?" she repeated. "Nathan, is that you?" I hung up quickly, my suspicions confirmed but feeling no sense of triumph. That evening, Nathan came home late again. He kissed me on the cheek, the same routine we'd had for years. But now, the gesture felt hollow. "How was your day?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Same old," he replied, heading for the shower and busy with the case. I watched him go, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. How many times had he lied to me like this? How long would he have continued if I hadn't found out? As I heard the shower start, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Nathan yet. I needed more time to process everything, to figure out what I wanted to do next. But I also couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. When Nathan came out of the shower, I was sitting on the bed, my suitcase beside me. "Olivia?" he asked, looking confused. "What's going on?" "I need some time," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days." "What? Why?" Nathan's face was a picture of innocence, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. "I just need to clear my head," I replied, standing up. "We'll talk when I get back." As I walked out the door, Nathan called after me, his voice tinged with desperation. "Olivia, wait, whatever it is, we can work it out." I paused at the threshold, turning to look at him one last time. For a moment, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the man I thought I knew. But then the image of him with Amanda flashed in my mind, and I steeled myself. "We'll talk when I get back," I repeated, and closed the door behind me. As I drove to my sister's house, tears streaming down my face, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, fear. But underneath it all was a small spark of something else: strength, determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: I deserved better than this. And whatever happened next, I would face it head on. My stay at my sister's house was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it gave me the space I desperately needed to clear my head and process everything that had happened. On the other hand, it left me with far too much time to overthink and second-guess myself. "You need to confront him, Olivia," my sister, Sarah, said one evening as we sat on her porch, nursing glasses of wine. "You can't keep living in limbo like this." I sighed, swirling the red liquid in my glass. "I know, I need to be sure. What if I'm wrong?" Sarah fixed me with a stern look. "Honey, you hired a private investigator. You have photos. How much more proof do you need?" She was right, of course. But the thought of confronting Nathan, of hearing him confirm what I already knew in my heart to be true, terrified me. It would make it real in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. That night, as I tossed and turned in Sarah's guest room, I made a decision. I needed more concrete evidence. Something Nathan couldn't deny or explain away. And I had an idea of how to get it. The next morning, I called Jess, the private investigator. "I need your help with something," I told her, outlining my plan. Jess was hesitant at first. "Are you sure about this, Olivia? It's a bit extreme." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady. "I need to know the truth once and for all." With Jess's reluctant agreement, I put my plan into motion. I told Nathan I was extending my stay at Sarah's for a few more days, using work as an excuse. In reality, I checked into a hotel near his office. I waited in the lobby, hidden behind a large potted plant, and watched as Nathan checked in. A few minutes later, the blonde woman I now knew to be Amanda arrived. They embraced in the lobby, not even bothering to look around to see if anyone was watching. My heart shattered all over again as I saw the tenderness in Nathan's eyes as he looked at her, a look that used to be reserved for me. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and started recording. I captured them walking to the elevator, Nathan's hand on the small of Amanda's back. I recorded until the elevator doors closed behind them, taking them up to their room, their secret rendezvous spot. As soon as they were gone, I stumbled out of the hotel, gasping for air. I felt like I was going to be sick. This was it, the undeniable proof I had been looking for. There was no way Nathan could explain this away. I spent the rest of the evening in my hotel room, alternating between bouts of anger and fits of tears. I watched the video I had taken over and over, each time feeling a fresh wave of pain wash over me. By morning, I had made up my mind. It was time to confront Nathan. I couldn't live with this knowledge anymore. I needed to hear him say it. I checked out of my hotel and headed home, my stomach in knots. As I turned the key in our apartment door, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Nathan was in the kitchen when I walked in. His face lit up when he saw me, and for a moment, I almost wavered. How could he look at me like that after what he had done? "Olivia," he exclaimed, moving to embrace me. "I've missed you so much. I'm so glad you're home." I stepped back, avoiding his touch. "We need to talk, Nathan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile faltered. "Of course. What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. I know about Amanda," the color drained from Nathan's face. "What?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I know everything. I have proof." Nathan's eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape route. "Olivia, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "Explain this." I played the video I had taken at the hotel. Nathan watched, his face a mask of shock and guilt. When it ended, he slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. "How long?" I asked, surprised by how calm I sounded. Nathan looked up at me, his eyes pleading. Olivia, I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake. How long? I repeated, emphasizing each word. He sighed, defeated, and 6 months. The admission hit me like a physical blow. 6 months, half a year of lies, of betrayal. While I had been planning our future, he had been building a life with someone else. I want you out, I said, my voice shaking. Tonight, I can't even look at you right now. Nathan stood up, reaching for me. Olivia, please, we can work this out. I love you. I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop him. Just don't. Pack your things and go. As I watched Nathan pack a bag, my mind was reeling. This was it, the moment our marriage ended, the life we had built together, the future we had planned. It was all crumbling around me. And yet, beneath the pain and betrayal, I felt something else stirring. A sense of relief. The truth was finally out. Now, I could start to heal. The days following Nathan's departure were a blur of emotions. I fluctuated between rage, despair, and a strange, hollow numbness. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on work. My entire world had been turned upside down, and I was struggling to find my footing. One morning, as I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, I came across a photo of Nathan and me from our last vacation. We looked so happy, so in love. The sight of it made my stomach churn. In a fit of anger, I started deleting every photo of us from my phone. As I did, I noticed something strange. In several recent photos, Nathan was wearing a watch I didn't recognize. An expensive-looking piece that I certainly hadn't bought him. My investigative instincts, honed from weeks of amateur sleuthing, kicked in. I zoomed in on the watch, noting its distinctive design. It was clearly a luxury brand, way out of our usual price range. Curiosity piqued. I decided to dig deeper. I logged into our joint bank account, scrolling through months of transactions. Nothing stood out at first, but then I noticed a pattern. Every few weeks, there was a large cash withdrawal from an ATM near Nathan's office. What were you up to? Nathan? I muttered to myself, jotting down the dates and amounts. I called Jess, the private investigator, and asked her to look into the watch and the withdrawals. She agreed, her voice tinged with concern. Olivia, are you sure you want to keep digging? You already know he was unfaithful. Does the rest really matter? I paused, considering her words. Did it matter? Wasn't the affair enough reason to end our marriage? But something inside me needed to know the whole truth. It matters to me, I said firmly. While I waited for Jess to get back to me, I threw myself into gathering more evidence. I combed through our credit card statements, looking for any unusual purchases. I checked our investment accounts, searching for unexplained transfers. As I dug deeper, a disturbing picture began to emerge. There were charges at high-end restaurants I'd never been to, purchases from jewelry stores, even a receipt for a weekend getaway at a luxury resort. My head was spinning. How had I been so blind? How had Nathan managed to hide all of this from me? 3 days later, Jess called me back. Her voice was grave. Olivia, you might want to sit down for this. I sank onto the couch, my heart pounding. What did you find? The watch is a limited edition piece. Retail value, about $50,000. I gasped. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. That's not all, Jess continued. Those cash withdrawals, they line up with deposits into a separate account. An account in Nathan's name only. My mind was reeling. How much? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Over the past year, close to $500,000. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. $500,000. Where on earth had Nathan gotten that kind of money? As if reading my thoughts, Jess spoke again. Olivia, I think you need to consider the possibility that Nathan might be involved in something illegal. Embezzlement, maybe, or worse. I thanked Jess numbly and hung up. My mind was racing. Nathan involved in something illegal. It seemed impossible, and yet the evidence was right there in front of me. I spent the next few hours in a daze, trying to process this new information. It wasn't just that Nathan had been unfaithful. He'd been living a completely separate life, one filled with luxury and deceit, and he'd been funding it with money that couldn't possibly have come from his salary alone. As night fell, I made a decision. I needed to confront Nathan again. I needed answers. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Nothing. Frustrated, I called his office. The receptionist sounded surprised to hear from me. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker, but Nathan hasn't been in the office for days. We thought he was out sick." My blood ran cold. Nathan hadn't been to work. Where was he? I hung up and immediately dialed Amanda's number, the one I'd found on that scrap of paper weeks ago. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Just as I was about to give up, someone answered. "Hello?" It was Amanda's voice, but she sounded different, scared. "Amanda, this is Olivia Parker, Nathan's wife. I need to talk to Nathan." "It's important." There was a long pause. When Amanda spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Olivia, I don't know where Nathan is. He disappeared 3 days ago. I've been trying to reach him, but his phone is off. I'm worried something's happened to him." My mind was spinning. Nathan was missing. Had he run away? Or had something more sinister happened? As I hung up the phone, I realized that the situation was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. There were missing funds, unexplained absences, and now, a disappearance. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. What had Nathan gotten himself into? And more importantly, what was I going to do now? The revelation of Nathan's disappearance sent my world into a tailspin. I spent the next few days in a haze of worry and confusion, torn between anger at his betrayal and fear for his safety. The police were little help, suggesting that Nathan had likely left of his own accord given the circumstances. On the 5th day after my conversation with Amanda, I received a cryptic text from an unknown number. "Meet me at our spot, 8 p.m., come alone." My heart raced. Our spot. It could only mean one place, the little cafe where Nathan and I had our first date. Despite every rational part of my brain screaming that this was a bad idea, I found myself driving there as the sun began to set. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, just a few patrons nursing cups of coffee. And there, in our old corner booth, was Nathan. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his usually impeccable suit rumpled and stained. I slid into the booth across from him, my emotions a swirling mix of relief, anger, and confusion. "Where have you been?" I hissed, keeping my voice low. "The police are looking for you. Amanda is worried sick." Nathan's eyes darted around nervously. "I'm in trouble, Olivia, big trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my anger momentarily overridden by concern. He leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been laundering money for some very dangerous people. I thought I could handle it, make some extra cash on the side, but things got out of control." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "The watch?" "The secret bank account." Nathan nodded miserably. "It started small, just a few thousand here and there, but then they wanted more, bigger amounts. I couldn't say no." "And Amanda?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "She doesn't know anything about this," Nathan said quickly. "The affair. That was just me being stupid and selfish. I'm so sorry, Olivia." I sat back, trying to process everything. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need your help," Nathan pleaded. "These people, they're after me. I need to disappear, start a new life somewhere else. I need money." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want me to give you money? After everything you've done?" "Please, Olivia," he begged, reaching for my hand across the table. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm desperate. They'll kill me if they find me." I pulled my hand away. a cold fury settling over me. "No," Nathan blinked, clearly not expecting this response. "What?" "I said no, Nathan," I repeated, my voice steady. "I'm not giving you a cent. You made this mess. You can deal with it." "But Olivia, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our marriage. You broke the law. And now you want me to bail you out? No, absolutely not." Nathan's face hardened. "Fine, if that's how you want to play it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small recorder. "I've got evidence of your involvement in all this. Bank transfers, conversations. If I go down, you're coming with me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What are you talking about? I wasn't involved in any of this." "Doesn't matter," Nathan sneered. "I've got enough to make it look like you were. So, what's it going to be, Olivia? Are you going to help me? Or do we both go to jail?" In that moment, looking at the desperate, cornered man in front of me, I realized I didn't recognize Nathan at all. The man I had loved, the man I had married, was gone. In his place was this stranger, willing to destroy me to save himself. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Do your worst, Nathan. I'm not afraid of you anymore." With that, I stood up and walked out of the cafe, ignoring Nathan's angry calls behind me. As soon as I got to my car, I called the police, giving them Nathan's location. 20 minutes later, I watched from across the street as Nathan was led out of the cafe in handcuffs, his face a mask of rage and betrayal. As the police car drove away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Finally, truly over. Back at home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sank onto the couch, emotionally drained. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Parker, this is Detective Johnson. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about your husband's activities." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what was to come. I knew the next few days, maybe even weeks, would be difficult. There would be questions, investigations, maybe even accusations. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had faced my worst fear, confronting Nathan, seeing the true extent of his betrayal, and I had come out stronger. I hadn't let him manipulate me or scare me into compliance. I had stood my ground. As I got ready to head to the police station, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who had first suspected Nathan's infidelity all those months ago. She was stronger, wiser, more resilient. I smiled at my reflection. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew I could face them. The worst was over. Now, it was time to start rebuilding my life on my own terms. The days following Nathan's arrest were a whirlwind of police interviews, legal consultations, and emotional turmoil. I found myself spending hours at the police station, recounting every detail of our relationship, our finances, and the events leading up to Nathan's disappearance and subsequent arrest. Detective Johnson, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, became a constant presence in my life. "Mrs. Parker," she said during one of our many interviews, "I know this is difficult, but we need to be thorough. Your husband's activities, they're more extensive than we initially thought." I nodded numbly, my mind struggling to process the magnitude of Nathan's deception. Each day seemed to bring new revelations, each more shocking than the last. The amount of money involved was staggering. The web of lies and illegal activities far-reaching. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of everything came crashing down on me. I looked around at the space Nathan and I had shared, at the life we had built together, and felt a crushing wave of despair wash over me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? I curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow to my chest as sobs racked my body. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to truly feel the pain, the betrayal, the loss of the future I thought I had. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself slipping into a deep depression. I couldn't sleep, plagued by nightmares of Nathan's betrayal. I couldn't eat, the mere thought of food making me nauseous. I called in sick to work, unable to face the pitying looks and whispered conversations I knew would follow me. My sister, Sarah, tried her best to help. She brought me food, cleaned the apartment, and sat with me through long, silent evenings. But even her presence couldn't shake the cloud of despair that had settled over me. "Olivia," she said gently one day, "have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist, maybe?" I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. The thought of rehashing everything with a stranger seemed unbearable. But as the days wore on, I realized I couldn't continue like this. I was drowning in my own sorrow, unable to see a way forward. With Sarah's encouragement, I finally made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Lydia Chen's office was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. As I sat across from her, fidgeting nervously, she smiled kindly at me. "Olivia," she said, her voice calm and steady, "why don't you tell me what brings you here today?" And so I did. I poured out the whole story, the suspicions, the investigation, the confrontation, the arrest. As I spoke, Dr. Chen listened attentively, nodding and occasionally making notes. When I finished, feeling drained but somehow lighter, Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Olivia, what you've been through is incredibly traumatic. It's natural to feel overwhelmed, depressed, even lost. But I want you to know that what you're feeling right now is not permanent. It will pass," I nodded. Wiping away the tears that had started to fall, I feel so stupid. How could I not have known? Dr. Chen shook her head. "You're not stupid, Olivia. Your husband went to great lengths to deceive you. This is not your fault." Over the next few weeks, I continued to see Dr. Chen regularly. We talked through my feelings of betrayal, my anger at Nathan, my fears for the future. Slowly, painfully, I began to process what had happened. One session, about a month into our therapy, Dr. Chen asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Olivia, if you could say anything to Nathan right now, without fear of consequences, what would it be?" I sat in silence for a long moment, considering. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely above a whisper. I'd tell him that he didn't just betray me, he betrayed himself. He threw away everything good in his life for money and cheap thrills. And in the end, he lost it all. Dr. Chen nodded. "That's very insightful, Olivia. And how do you feel about yourself in all of this?" I paused, realizing I hadn't really thought about that. I'm proud of myself," I said slowly, surprised by my own words. "I'm proud that I didn't let him manipulate me in the end, that I stood up for myself." "You should be proud," Dr. Chen said with a smile. "You've shown incredible strength and resilience." As I left Dr. Chen's office that day, I felt a small spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The pain wasn't gone, the betrayal still stung, but for the first time, I could see a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. That evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I made a decision. I couldn't let Nathan's actions define the rest of my life. I had to find a way to move forward, to rebuild. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. "Hey," I said when she answered. "I was wondering if that offer to help me redecorate the apartment is still open." I could hear the smile in Sarah's voice as she replied, "Of course it is. When do you want to start?" "How about tomorrow?" I said, feeling a small surge of excitement. "I think it's time for a change." As I hung up the phone, I looked around at the apartment, at the life Nathan and I had shared. It was time to let go of the past, to create a new life for myself. It wouldn't be easy. I knew that. There would still be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and pain. But for the first time in months, I felt ready to face them. I was ready to start healing, to rediscover who I was without Nathan. And as I watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. As the months passed, I slowly but surely began to rebuild my life. The apartment, once filled with memories of Nathan, was now a reflection of my own tastes and personality. Soft blues and greens replaced the stark whites Nathan had preferred, and my beloved collection of art books now adorned the shelves where his law tomes once stood. One morning, as I sipped my coffee on the balcony, I realized with a start that I hadn't thought about Nathan in days. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it no longer consumed me. I had survived, and I was growing stronger every day. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Lunch today? I have some news." I smiled, typing back a quick "yes" before heading to get ready for work. My job as an architect had become my anchor during the tumultuous months following Nathan's arrest. I threw myself into my projects, finding solace in the clean lines and precise measurements of my designs. As I walked into the office, my colleague Tom greeted me with a grin. "Hey Olivia, the clients loved your design for the new eco-friendly office building. They want to move forward with it." I felt a surge of pride and excitement. This was the biggest project I'd ever led, and its success was entirely my own. No shadow of Nathan's influence, no doubt about my abilities, just me, my talent, and my hard work. "That's fantastic, Tom," I beamed. "When do they want to start?" As Tom filled me in on the details, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. Just a few months ago, I'd been a shell of myself, barely able to get out of bed. Now, I was leading major projects and feeling more confident in my abilities than ever before. At lunch, Sarah was practically bouncing with excitement. "So," she said as soon as we sat down, "I've been offered a promotion. It's a big step up, but it means moving to New York." I felt a mix of emotions, joy for my sister's success, sadness at the thought of her leaving, and a surprising spark of envy, not of her promotion, but of the adventure, the fresh start she was embarking on. "That's amazing, Sarah," I said, pushing aside my conflicting feelings. "I'm so proud of you." Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Thanks, Liv, but, well, I was thinking, why don't you come with me?" I blinked in surprise. "What?" "Think about it," Sarah continued, her eyes shining with excitement. "A new city, new opportunities. You could start your own architecture firm like you've always dreamed of. It could be a fresh start for both of us." I sat back, my mind whirling with possibilities. A fresh start, a chance to reinvent myself completely, away from the whispers and pitying looks that still followed me in this city where everyone knew my story. I'll think about it," I promised Sarah. That evening, as I walked home from work, I found myself taking a detour. Without really meaning to, I ended up at the courthouse where Nathan's trial had taken place. I stood on the steps, looking up at the imposing building. The last time I'd been here, I'd been testifying against my husband, my voice shaking as I recounted his betrayals. I'd felt small then, vulnerable, like my whole world was crumbling around me. But now, standing on those same steps, I felt different, stronger. I'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable, and I'd come out the other side. I wasn't the same woman who had entered that courthouse months ago. I was someone new, someone stronger. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a familiar face. Amanda, Nathan's former mistress, was walking out of the courthouse. Our eyes met, and for a moment, we both froze. To my surprise, Amanda approached me. "Olivia," she said hesitantly, I owe you an apology. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. She seemed smaller somehow, less glamorous than I remembered. Just another person who'd been caught up in Nathan's web of lies. "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope you're doing okay." Amanda nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm I'm trying to make amends, to do better. As I watched her walk away, I felt the last vestiges of anger and bitterness I'd been holding on to dissolve. Nathan had hurt us both, in different ways, but we were both moving on, both trying to be better. That night, I called Sarah. "I've made a decision," I told her. "I'm coming to New York with you." I could hear the smile in her voice as she whooped with joy. "Oh, Liv, it's going to be amazing. We'll take New York by storm." As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. I was about to embark on a new adventure, to chase my dreams in a way I never had before. I opened my laptop and started researching what it would take to start my own architecture firm in New York. As I worked late into the night, making plans and dreaming big, I realized something. For the first time since Nathan's betrayal, I was truly happy. Not just surviving, but thriving. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling energized and ready to face the day. As I stood on my balcony, watching the sun rise over the city, I smiled to myself. This was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I was the author of my own story. Nathan's betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the end, it had made me stronger. I had faced my worst nightmare and come out the other side. Now, I was ready to chase my dreams, to build the life I truly wanted. As I turned to go back inside, ready to start packing for my new life in New York, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was confident, strong, and ready for anything. She was a survivor, a fighter, and now, finally, she was free.